Hunter was 37 years old, earned a steady $61,000 a year as a facilities supervisor for the New York State Legislature, and on a Tuesday evening at 8:14 p.m., his world was systematically dismantled. He was standing in the kitchen of their modest three-bedroom colonial on a quiet street in Albany, the one with the slightly crooked porch swing he'd been meaning to fix. The air smelled of the lemon garlic chicken he'd just pulled from the oven, a recipe she loved. He had his back to the living room, carefully plating the meal on their white crate and barrel dishes, the ones they'd received as a wedding gift 10 years ago, a set that probably cost $200 back then. He was a man who found comfort in routines, in the reliable hum of the refrigerator and the predictable weight of his tools at work. His life was a structure he had built with his own two hands, and he believed it was solid. He had no idea it was hollow inside. He heard the click-clack of her heels on the hardwood floor, a sound that usually meant she was home from her administrative job at the university, tired, but ready to unwind. But the rhythm was different tonight. It was purposeful, sharp, like the sound of a gavel falling. He turned, a smile already forming on his lips, ready to ask about her day. The smile died before it was born. Charisma was standing by the front door, flanked by two large Louis Vuitton suitcases, each one a testament to a lifestyle they couldn't afford, each one costing a staggering $3,500. She was wearing a sleek black Calvin Klein dress that cost $700, a recent purchase he'd questioned but ultimately relented on. Her beautiful, deep brown skin was luminous under the warm light of the foyer lamp, but her expression was cold, impenetrable, like the polished marble floors he supervised at the Empire State Plaza. "What's this?" Hunter asked, his voice quiet. The chicken on the plate suddenly seemed absurd. "I'm leaving, Hunter," she said. Her tone was flat, devoid of the emotion he would have expected. It was the voice of a person announcing a finalized business transaction. "I can't do this anymore." He put the plates down on the granite countertop, a $1,500 upgrade she'd insisted on 2 years ago. "Do what? Charisma? Talk to me? Did something happen at work?" She let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound he'd never heard from her before, and it chilled him more than her words. "Work? Hunter, this isn't about work. This is about this." She made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the entire room. The comfortable, if slightly worn, 10-year-old sofa from Raymore and Flanagan that cost them $800, the framed photos on the wall of their trips to the Adirondacks, his simple $89 Timex watch on the end table. This life, it's not enough. It's never going to be enough for me. He felt a knot of confusion tighten in his stomach. Not enough? We have a home. We have each other. I thought we were happy. You were happy, Hunter. You're content with your $61,000 salary and your state pension. You're happy fixing things and coming home to a quiet house. That's fine for you. She stepped forward, her expensive perfume, a $300 bottle of Chanel No. 5, filling the space between them. But I deserve more. I deserve more than you can give. The words hit him like stones. Each one was a carefully aimed projectile designed to shatter his perception of their life together. I deserve more. It wasn't an argument, it was a verdict. He felt the floor drop out from under him, the sturdy foundation of his life cracking into 1,000 pieces. He had spent a decade trying to give her everything he had, and she was standing there telling him his everything was worth nothing. What had he missed? Were there signs? He felt a fool, a blind man who hadn't realized the sun had set. He wanted to shout, to argue, to plead, but the shock had stolen the air from his lungs. All he could do was stand there, a ghost in his own home, while the woman he loved looked at him like he was a stranger who was in her way. Have you ever had a moment where the entire world shifts on its axis, where everything you thought was true turns out to be a lie? Tell us in the comments if you've ever felt a betrayal that completely changed your life, and stick with us to see how one man's quiet dignity became his greatest weapon. Their life, from the outside, had been a portrait of domestic normalcy. Hunter remembered the day they bought the house 7 years ago. He was 30, she was 29. The house on Maplewood Avenue was a fixer-upper, a 1950s colonial that needed a lot of work, but it was theirs for the bargain price of $162,000. He had spent every weekend for a year bringing it back to life. He learned how to lay tile in the bathroom, a project that cost him $400 in materials and countless hours watching tutorials online. He replastered the walls, hung new drywall, and painted every room himself, saving them at least $10,000 in labor costs. He saw the house as a physical manifestation of their shared future, a place where every nail he hammered was a promise. He showed his love through acts of service. He was the one who woke up at 6 a.m. every morning to make coffee, just the way she liked it, with a splash of cream and 1 packet of raw sugar. He was the one who scraped the ice off her 2018 Honda Accord, a car with a monthly payment of $380, on frigid Albany mornings, so she wouldn't have to. When she mentioned offhandedly that she liked the hydrangeas in a neighbor's yard, he spent an entire Saturday digging up their front lawn and planting a garden for her, a $200 investment in her fleeting happiness. He would cook tech dinner most nights, simple, hearty meals that he knew she enjoyed. He remembered one evening, maybe a year before she left, they were eating on the back deck he had built himself, a project that cost $2,000 in lumber and hardware. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He reached across the patio table and took her hand. "I love you," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. She smiled, a quick, distracted flash of teeth. "You too, babe," she'd replied, her eyes already drifting back to the screen of her iPhone 12, a $900 device she was never without. He hadn't thought much of it then, but now the memory was a shard of glass in his mind. The facade was perfect, but the cracks had been there, spreading silently beneath the surface. He just hadn't wanted to see them. There were the constant, subtle digs at his job. "My friend Sarah's husband just made partner at his law firm," she'd say. "They're going to Tuscany for 2 weeks." Hunter, who managed a team of 25 people responsible for the maintenance of millions of square feet of critical state infrastructure, would just nod. His job didn't have the glamour of a law firm, but it had security, a pension, and good benefits. He thought that mattered. He was wrong. Then came the spending. It started small. A $400 Michael Kors handbag she claimed was on sale. A pair of $300 Stuart Weitzman shoes for a wedding. Then it escalated. He remembered coming home one day to find a massive box from Restoration Hardware in the living room. Inside was a $700 floor lamp, an extravagant sculptural piece that looked completely out of place next to their comfortable, lived-in furniture. "Don't you love it?" she'd chirped. "It just elevates the whole room." He'd looked at their joint bank account that night and felt a familiar clench of anxiety. They had goals, saving for a real vacation, building their retirement. But her desire for the appearance of wealth was constantly undermining their progress. The joint savings account, which he diligently contributed to every month, was supposed to be their safety net. It was the result of years of his careful budgeting and her sporadic contributions. They had built it up to $48,000, a number that made Hunter feel secure. He had no idea she saw it as her personal exit fund. He saw their shared finances as a partnership. She saw it as a resource to be exploited, The night she left was only the beginning. The real betrayal, the kind that digs into your soul and festers, came in waves over the next few weeks. After she walked out the door, her suitcases rolling behind her, the silence she left behind was deafening. The lemon garlic chicken sat on the counter, growing cold. He didn't eat. He couldn't. He just stood in the center of the living room, the room she had so casually dismissed, and tried to breathe. He felt the weight of her final words. "I deserve more than you can give." It was a judgment on his character, his worth, his entire existence. The next morning, Wednesday at 9:05 a.m., he called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He sent a text. "Charisma, please call me. We need to talk." The message remained unread. He went to work, moving through his day like an automaton. He walked the endless, sterile corridors of the Empire State Plaza, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous spaces. He oversaw a repair on a critical HVAC unit on the 34th floor, his hands steady, his instructions clear, his mind a million miles away. He felt like a fraud, a man in charge of maintaining a massive, complex structure while his own life was collapsing into rubble. On Thursday, he decided to check their joint savings account online. He needed to transfer some money to their checking to pay the mortgage, a monthly payment of $1,152. He logged into the Bank of America app on his phone. His heart stopped. The balance, which should have been $48,212, read a stark, brutal $87. He blinked, thinking it was a mistake, a glitch in the system. He refreshed the page. $87. He scrolled down through the transaction history. There it was, dated Tuesday at 2:30 p.m., just 6 hours before she had walked out. A single transaction, withdrawal counter, amount $48,125. The air rushed out of his lungs. She had planned it. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born from an argument. This was a calculated, premeditated act of theft. She had gone to the bank, looked a teller in the eye, and systematically emptied the account that held their shared future, the money he had so carefully saved. He felt a wave of nausea so intense he had to grip the edge of his desk. This was a level of cruelty he couldn't comprehend. She hadn't just left him. She had plundered their life on her way out the door, taking every last penny of their security. He drove to the bank branch on his lunch break. The teller, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, confirmed his worst fears. The withdrawal was made in person by Charisma. It was a cashier's check made out to her alone. It was all perfectly legal, as her name was on the account. Legally, she had done nothing wrong. Morally, she had committed an act of profound violence. That weekend, while sorting through some mail, he found a credit card statement that had slipped under the couch. It wasn't their joint card. It was one in her name alone that he didn't even know she had. His hands trembled as he opened it. The charges told a story of a secret life. There were dinners at expensive restaurants in Saratoga Springs, places he knew they couldn't afford. A $400 meal at 15 Church, a $250 charge at Salt and Char. There was a charge for a 2-night stay at the Adelphi Hotel in Saratoga, a 5-star hotel where rooms started at $600 a night. The dates were from a weekend 2 months ago when she had told him she was at a work conference in Syracuse. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. There was someone else. Of course there was. The phrase, "I deserve more," wasn't just about money. It was about a new life with a new man. The confirmation came a week later. A mutual friend, hesitant and apologetic, called him. "Hunter, I don't know how to tell you this," she started, "but I think you should see Charisma's Instagram." He didn't have social media, finding it to be a waste of time. He asked the friend to send him screenshots. The images that arrived on his phone were like a series of gut punches. There was Charisma, beaming, standing next to a handsome, smug-looking man. They were on a balcony overlooking the ocean in Miami. He was a local entrepreneur, the friend explained, a man named Marcus who had made a fortune in tech startups. In one photo, Marcus had his arm around her, and on her wrist was a glittering new Cartier Love bracelet, a piece of jewelry that Hunter knew cost over $7,000. The caption read, "Finally, with a man who knows my worth, upgraded, living my best life." In another photo, she was leaning against a gleaming white BMW M8, a car that cost upwards of $135,000. She had tagged Marcus, his profile full of pictures of exotic cars, expensive watches, and a life of ostentatious luxury. Then came the texts from Charisma herself, cold and clinical. When he finally texted her, demanding an explanation for the stolen money, her reply was instantaneous and brutal. "Consider the $48K my severance package for a decade of wasted time. You should be grateful I didn't take more." Every word was a twist of the knife. She saw their marriage not as a partnership, but as a job she had quit, and she had decided on her own compensation. The final, most audacious act of betrayal arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a certified letter. It was from a high-priced law firm in downtown Albany. Inside, a letter drafted by an attorney informed him of Charisma's intent to file for divorce. It went on to state her demand for 50% of the value of their marital home. She wanted to force a sale and take half the proceeds. After stealing their entire life savings, after leaving him for another man, after publicly humiliating him, she still had the gall to come after the house that he had poured his own sweat and blood into, the house that he had loved and cared for. The rage that had been simmering inside him finally boiled over. But it wasn't a hot, explosive rage. It was cold and sharp and clear. She had made a critical mistake. She had underestimated him. She had mistaken his kindness for weakness, his quiet nature for a lack of resolve. And in that moment, sitting at his kitchen table with her lawyer's $3,000 letter in his hand, Hunter stopped being a victim. He started to plan. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks after she had left. The house felt unnervingly large and empty. Every room held a ghost of a memory he was trying to exorcise. The lawyer's letter sat on the coffee table, a constant, mocking reminder of Charisma's greed. He felt buried, crushed under the weight of her betrayal and the impending legal battle he couldn't afford. Defeated, he decided to clean out the attic, a task he'd been putting off for years. He needed a physical distraction, something to occupy his hands and quiet the storm in his head. The attic was hot and stuffy, smelling of old wood and forgotten things. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the bare bulb hanging from a rafter. He started sorting through old boxes, a painful archaeology of their life together. Old photo albums, college yearbooks, a box of her sentimental items he didn't have the heart to throw away yet. In the far corner, under a dusty canvas tarp, was a metal file box that had belonged to his father. His dad had been a meticulous man, a city bus driver who believed in paperwork and keeping records. He had passed away 2 years before Hunter and Charisma got married, but his lessons on responsibility and prudence had always stuck with Hunter. He pried open the rusty latch on the box. Inside were old tax returns, his father's army discharge papers, and a thick manila envelope with the words "house documents" written in his father's neat, blocky handwriting. Hunter's heart gave a strange little flutter. He pulled out the envelope and emptied its contents onto the dusty floor. There were inspection reports, insurance papers, and at the very bottom a thick, folded document with a blue legal cover. It was the original deed to the house. He unfolded it carefully. The paper was heavy, official. He ran his fingers over the embossed seal of the Albany County Clerk's office. His eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on the key details. This indenture, made the 12th day of May, it began. He checked the year. It was the year he bought the house. Then he saw the names. Grantor, the previous owner. Grantee. Hunter Washington, a single man. A single man. The date on the deed was May 12th. He and Charisma had gotten married on August 24th of that same year, more than 3 months after he had closed on the house. He remembered the conversation with his father vividly now. They had been sitting in his dad's small apartment. "Son, you're buying this house with your own money, the money you saved and the little I left for you," his father had said, his voice firm. "You and Charisma are getting married, and I wish you all the happiness in the world. But you put this house in your name, and your name alone, before the wedding. It's not about not trusting her. It's about being smart. You protect what's yours." At the time, Hunter had felt a pang of guilt, as if he were somehow betraying Charisma before they even started. But he had listened to his father. He had signed the papers as a single man. The house was his. It had never been a marital asset. He sat there on the floor of the hot, dusty attic, the deed in his hands, and felt a profound sense of clarity wash over him. The air seemed to clear. Charisma's lawyer's letter, with its blustering demands and threats, was nothing more than expensive, empty words. She had no claim. She had no leverage. He held the proof right here in his hands. It was a shield, forged by his father's wisdom years ago, and it was going to protect him now. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. The game had just changed. On Monday morning at 7:30 a.m., Hunter was sitting in the waiting room of a law office on State Street, just a few blocks from his own workplace. The firm wasn't one of the massive glass and steel operations Charisma's lawyer belonged to. It was a smaller, more discreet practice. Adebayo and Associates. He had found Ms. Evelyn Adebayo through a recommendation from a trusted colleague at work. The colleague had described her as no-nonsense and sharp as a razor. The office was clean, professional, and unpretentious. The art on the walls featured vibrant prints from black artists, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. A moment later, a woman in her late 40s emerged. She was a tall, elegant black woman with her hair in intricate twists, wearing a tailored navy blue suit that probably cost $1,000, but looked like it was worth 10 times that. Her expression was serious, but not unkind. "Mr. Washington, I'm Evelyn Adebayo. Please come in." Hunter followed her into her office. It was lined with books, not just law tomes, but works of history and literature. She gestured for him to sit in a comfortable leather chair opposite her large mahogany desk. "My colleague said you were in a difficult situation," she began, her voice calm and measured. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Hunter laid out the entire story, his voice steady, devoid of the emotional turmoil he felt inside. He spoke of the 10-year marriage, Charisma's increasing dissatisfaction, the night she left, her cruel words. He detailed the $48,000 withdrawal from their joint savings, showing her the bank statement. He showed her the screenshots of her Instagram posts with Marcus, the flaunting of the Cartier bracelet, and the BMW M8. Finally, he placed the letter from Charisma's lawyer on the desk, followed by the original deed to the house. Ms. Adebayo listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. She read each document carefully, her expression unreadable. When she finished the deed, she looked up, and for the first time, a small, knowing smile touched her lips. "Mr. Washington," she said, her tone crisp and confident, "your wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, has made a catastrophic error in judgment." She leaned forward. "This deed is ironclad. The house is your sole and separate property. It was acquired before the marriage, and as long as you didn't formally add her name to the title at any point, she is entitled to precisely 0% of its value. A weight Hunter hadn't even realized he was carrying lifted from his shoulders. "I never did," he said. "I never added her name." "Excellent," Ms. Adebayo said. She tapped the lawyer's letter with a perfectly manicured finger. "This letter is a bluff, an intimidation tactic. Her attorney is counting on you not knowing your rights. As for the $48,000 she took from the joint account, while technically not illegal since her name was on it, in the context of a divorce proceeding, it is considered dissipation of marital assets. We can argue that this amount should be credited to you from her share of any other divisible assets." She paused. "Although, from what you've told me, there are no other significant assets." "No," Hunter said. "That was everything." "Then we will use it as leverage," she stated. "Here is what we are going to do. First, my firm will draft a response to this letter. It will be polite, professional, and it will inform them that the house is your premarital property and not subject to division. We will include a copy of the deed. Second, you will immediately list the house for sale." Hunter was taken aback. "Sell it? Now?" "Immediately," she confirmed. "You will sell it, and you will take every penny of the proceeds. It is your money, Mr. Washington. You will use it to start over. You will not engage with her. You will not answer her calls or texts. All communication will go through my office. My rate is $450 per hour. I will require a $5,000 retainer. I believe we can resolve this matter for you swiftly and in your favor. Do we have an agreement?" Hunter looked at this powerful, intelligent woman, a woman who had assessed his shattered life and, in a matter of minutes, handed him a blueprint for rebuilding it. He felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "We have an agreement." He walked out of that office an hour later, $5,000 poorer, but feeling more in control of his life than he had in years. The strategy was set. The trap was laid. All he had to do now was wait. The next 90 days were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Hunter became an actor in his own life, playing the part of the grieving, abandoned husband while methodically dismantling the last remnants of his life with charisma. He followed Ms. Adebayo's instructions to the letter. He did not speak to Charisma. When she sent a flurry of texts asking why he wasn't responding to her lawyer, he simply forwarded them to Ms. Adebayo and replied with a single, neutral sentence, "My lawyer will be in touch." The hardest part was dealing with her family. Her mother, Darlene, called him 2 weeks after he'd hired his attorney. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone he knew meant she was fishing for information. "Hunter, baby, how are you holding up?" she asked. He was in the break room at work, a sterile space with a vending machine and a microwave. He kept his voice level. "I'm doing okay, Darlene. Taking it one day at a time." "I just don't understand what's gotten into that girl," Darlene continued, feigning ignorance. "Leaving a good, steady man like you. Is she talking to you at all?" "Her lawyer said you're not being very cooperative about the house." This was it. The test. He could have unloaded on her, told her about the stolen money, the affair, the public humiliation. But Ms. Adebayo's voice was in his head. "Do not engage. All communication goes through me." "We're just letting the lawyers handle the details, Darlene," he said calmly. "It's better that way. Less emotional." It was a lie, a beautiful, strategic lie. Inside, he was a cauldron of emotions, but on the outside, he was as cool and placid as the surface of the Hudson River on a windless day. "Well, I just hope you two can be fair about it," she pressed. "Charisma put a lot of work into that home, you know." He nearly choked. Charisma's idea of work was picking out a $200 paint color from Benjamin Moore and supervising him while he did the actual painting. "I'll be sure to keep that in mind," he said, the words tasting like ash. "I have to go, Darlene. A work thing." He hung up, his hand trembling slightly. He had passed the test. Meanwhile, the plan was in motion. He hired a real estate agent, a sharp woman named Brenda, who came highly recommended. She priced the house aggressively at $339,000, citing the hot market and the upgrades he had personally made. The "for sale" sign went up in the yard. Within a week, they had multiple offers. He accepted one for $345,000, $6,000 over asking. Charisma must have found out about the sale from her mother, because he received a frantic email from her. The subject line was, "The house?" The body of the email was a torrent of angry questions. "What the hell are you doing, Hunter? You can't sell the house without my permission. That's our house. My lawyer is going to have a field day with this." He took a deep breath, read it twice, and then forwarded it to Ms. Adebayo. An hour later, he received a draft of his reply. It was a masterpiece of cold, corporate indifference. "Charisma, all matters related to the property at 412 Maplewood Avenue are being handled by my legal counsel. Please direct all future inquiries to her office. Hunter." He copied and pasted it, hit send, and then blocked her email address. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie of someone else's life. He went to work every day, managing his team, troubleshooting complex mechanical systems in the heart of New York's government, and no one knew the war he was quietly waging. He was a ghost, moving unseen through the wreckage of his past, laying the groundwork for his future. The strike, when it came, was not a thunderous explosion, but a quiet, inevitable click of a lock into place. It happened in stages, each one a nail in the coffin of Charisma's entitled assumptions. The first stage was the legal response. Ms. Adebayo sent a crisp, 2-page letter to Charisma's attorney. It methodically dismantled every one of their claims. It cited the date of purchase, the date of marriage, and attached a certified copy of the premarital deed. It then addressed the $48,000, stating that Ms. Washington's unilateral withdrawal and subsequent dissipation of the entirety of the couple's liquid marital assets would be aggressively pursued in the final divorce decree. The letter concluded by informing them that the property was under contract and that any attempt to interfere with the sale would be met with a lawsuit for damages. The response from Charisma's lawyer was silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The second stage was the closing. 92 days after Charisma walked out, Hunter sat in a sterile conference room at a title company. He signed his name over and over again on a mountain of paperwork. The final document he signed was the settlement statement. He looked at the numbers. Sale price, $345,000. After realtor commissions, taxes, and fees, the net proceeds to seller came to $312,451.17. The title agent slid a check across the table. It was made out to him, and him alone. He held it in his hand, this piece of paper that represented the sum total of his past and the entire capital for his future. He deposited it that afternoon into a new bank account at a new bank, an account Charisma didn't know existed. He used the money wisely. He didn't buy a fancy car or expensive clothes. He paid Ms. Adebayo's final bill of $8,500. Then he bought a new home. It wasn't a large colonial. It was a small, 2-bedroom brick bungalow in the Pine Hills neighborhood, a quiet area with tree-lined streets and a strong sense of community. He paid $195,000 for it in cash. There would be no mortgage. The house was his free and clear. He spent the next month moving in, painting the walls a calm, soothing gray, and setting up a small workshop in the basement. He was building a new life, a life of peace and independence, a life that was truly his own. 6 months to the day after Charisma had left him, the final stage of the strike unfolded. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7:15 p.m. A cold November rain was falling, slicking the streets of Albany with a dark sheen. Hunter was in the living room of his new bungalow, sitting in a comfortable armchair he'd bought for $600 at a local furniture store. He was reading a book, a history of the construction of the Erie Canal, and listening to the rain tap against the windows. He felt a sense of profound peace. Miles away, on Maplewood Avenue, a taxi pulled up to the curb in front of his old house. The windows of the house glowed with a warm, inviting light. Charisma got out of the cab. She looked different. The confident, defiant woman who had walked out 6 months ago was gone. This woman looked tired and worn. Her $2,400 Burberry trench coat was rumpled, and the hem was damp from the rain. Her hair was frizzy from the humidity. Her face, once a mask of cold superiority, was now etched with desperation. Her venture with Marcus had clearly ended, and it had not ended well. She was a ship without a harbor, seeking shelter in a port that no longer existed. She walked up the familiar flagstone path, her heels clicking nervously. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door Hunter had painted a cheerful hunter green 3 summers ago. She was expecting to see him, to see the shock on his face, to begin her carefully rehearsed speech of regret and reconciliation. She was ready to negotiate her way back into the life she had so carelessly thrown away. The door opened, but it wasn't Hunter. It was a young woman in her late 20s with kind eyes and a toddler clinging to her leg. The hallway behind her was filled with the scent of baking cookies and the happy clutter of a young family. A child's drawing, full of bright, chaotic colors, was taped to the wall. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice friendly. Charisma stared, her mind struggling to process the scene. I'm looking for Hunter Washington," she stammered. "He lives here. He used to live here. I'm his wife." The young woman's friendly expression shifted to one of polite confusion, mixed with a hint of pity. "Oh," she said softly. "We bought this house from him back in August. He moved, I'm sorry. I don't have a forwarding address for him." She paused, then added, "You look soaked. Are you okay?" The blood drained from Charisma's face. He sold it. He had sold their house. The foundation she had assumed would always be there for her to fall back on was gone. He had erased her, completely and utterly. She couldn't speak. The new owner's simple question, "Are you okay?" hung in the air, a devastating indictment of her situation. She was standing on the porch of a stranger's house, a house that held all her old memories, and she had never felt more alone. The taxi she had arrived in had already driven off down the street. The rain began to fall harder, plastering her expensive coat to her body, washing away the last vestiges of her pride. She was homeless, anchorless, a ghost haunting a life that was no longer hers. She had knocked on the wrong door, and in doing so had finally come face to face with the consequences of her choices. The full story of Charisma's downfall came to Hunter a week later, not from her, but from their mutual friend, Sarah, the same one who had first shown him the Instagram posts. She called him one evening, her voice full of a grim sort of satisfaction. "You're not going to believe this," Sarah began. "I ran into Charisma's old co-worker. Apparently Marcus dumped her about a month ago." The enumeration of her losses was swift and brutal. First, the money. The $48,000 she had stolen was gone. She had burned through it in less than 5 months. The rent on her luxury apartment in Saratoga Springs was $4,000 a month. That alone accounted for $20,000. The rest had been spent on a new wardrobe to keep up with Marcus's social circle. Gucci shoes for $900, a Prada handbag for $2,500, and lavish dinners where a single bottle of wine cost $300. She had tried to live a life she hadn't earned, and the bill had come due. Second, the relationship. Marcus, the great prize for whom she'd thrown everything away, had turned out to be as shallow as she was. His tech company hit a rough patch, and his projected fortune took a nosedive. The moment he was no longer able to fund her extravagant lifestyle, he lost interest. According to Sarah's source, his parting words were, "I wanted a partner, not a parasite." He took back the white BMW M8, which had been leased in his company's name. He even asked for the $7,000 Cartier bracelet back, claiming it was a loaned asset. Third, her career. When she had moved in with Marcus, she had impulsively quit her stable administrative job at the university, a job that paid $52,000 a year with excellent benefits. She had assumed Marcus would take care of her indefinitely. Now she was unemployed, with a 6-month gap on her resume, and no professional references from her last position. She was trying to find work, but the job market was tight, and her pride made it difficult for her to seek a position that she felt was beneath her. Fourth, her social standing. The friends who had once admired her glamorous new life now saw her for what she was. News of how she had treated Hunter, the theft, the affair, the legal threats had spread through their old circle. No one was returning her calls. She was completely isolated, having burned every bridge on her way to a fantasy that had evaporated. The final consequence was a piece of poetic justice. Her own high-priced lawyer, after being stonewalled by Miss Adebayo and realizing there was no house to get a piece of, had sent Charisma a final bill for $5,000 for services rendered. She had no way to pay it. She had started with $48,000 and a smug sense of superiority. She ended with nothing, in debt, and standing alone in the rain on a stranger's doorstep. Hunter listened to all of this, not with joy or a desire for revenge, but with a quiet, somber sense of finality. Her downfall wasn't his victory. It was simply the result of her own choices, the logical end to a path she had chosen to walk. He had simply refused to walk it with her. 1 year later. The sun was bright over Albany, a perfect Sunday in early autumn. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the maple trees in Hunter's yard were beginning to turn brilliant shades of red and gold. His bungalow in Pine Hills had become a sanctuary. The garden he had planted in the spring was flourishing with late-season tomatoes and hardy kale. The porch swing, a sturdy new one he had built himself for about $150 in materials, no longer crooked, swayed gently in the breeze. Life had settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. His work at the Empire State Plaza was more fulfilling than ever. He had taken a young man under his wing, a 22-year-old apprentice named Jamal, who had just started in the facilities department. Jamal was bright and eager, with a quick mind for mechanical systems, but a lack of confidence. Hunter saw a younger version of himself in the kid. He spent time teaching Jamal how to read complex schematics for the building's massive chiller plant, explaining the delicate balance of pressure and flow. He showed him the dignity in working with your hands, in being the person who keeps the lights on and the air flowing. He saw Jamal's confidence grow, and it filled him with a quiet sense of purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. That afternoon, he was on one of his Sunday walks along the Hudson River at the Corning Preserve. The sunlight glinted off the water, and families were out enjoying the day. He felt a sense of belonging, of being rooted in a community. He no longer felt like a ghost in his own life. He was present, solid, and whole. When he got home, there was a letter in his mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was Charisma's. His first instinct was to throw it away, unopened. But curiosity and a sense that this was the final piece of the story made him slit it open. The letter was short. It was a rambling, disjointed apology. She wrote that she was living with her mother, working a temp job, and trying to pay off her debts. She wrote that she knew she had made a terrible mistake, that she had been foolish and greedy. She asked for his forgiveness. He read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and put it away. He felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not even satisfaction. Her apology wasn't for him, it was for her. It was an attempt to alleviate her own guilt. And he realized he didn't need it. He had already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. He had forgiven her the moment he decided to sell the house and start over. He had let go of the bitterness because holding on to it was like carrying a dead weight, and he had a new life to build. He looked around his small, quiet house, the house he had bought with his own money, a house filled not with expensive things but with peace. He thought about his work, about the respect he had earned, about the young man he was mentoring. He thought about his walks by the river and the simple joy of a well-tended garden. He finally understood the truth. Charisma had been right about one thing. She did deserve more than he could give, because he could never give her a character that matched her ambition. He had offered her a life of substance, and she had traded it for a life of style, only to find out that style fades. True wealth isn't measured by the price tag on your car or the brand of your handbag. It's measured in integrity, in peace of mind, in the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Some people are so poor, all they have is money. Hunter Washington was a rich man. We all face moments that test our character. How we respond defines who we are. If you believe in the power of quiet strength and the importance of integrity, subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding true happiness.